In small-town Ontario, I uncovered evidence of immigration fraud, sham marriage, child exploitation, and the abuse of Canada's temporary foreign worker program, backed by audits, data, and public sentiment. But instead of investigating any of that, the local paper called the Picton Gazette smeared my reporting as hate, comparing it to a 1925 KKK cross-burning. Apparently, facts that challenge political correctness make legacy media uncomfortable. So I asked their publisher 8 tough questions. And his evasive, circular replies reveal everything wrong with agenda-driven journalism. So let's dig in. In the small town of Picton, Ontario, I uncovered a disturbing case. The manager of a local Tim Hortons was texting one of her underage staff in an attempt to coerce the vulnerable minor into a $20,000 arranged marriage to keep her Indian brother in Canada. Those aren't my words, they come directly from the text messages. I also pointed to a bigger issue, which is that this case may be a microcosm of how the temporary foreign worker program is being exploited to flood Canada with cheap labor, sidelining Canadians in the meantime. That's not speculation, it's straight from government reports that I broke down in my latest investigation. Instead of digging into these real abuses backed by federal audits and polls showing that 71% of Canadians want immigration reduced, the Picton Gazette smeared my reporting as hate, linking it absurdly to a 1925 Ku Klux Klan cross-burning. I'm not sure it gets any more blatant than that when it comes to inflammatory propaganda. This deflection of the facts and lack of substantial journalism only serves to protect the status quo. That is why I fired off 8 pointed questions to publisher Christopher Fanning, seeking clarification on the provocative rhetoric shared in not just 1, but 2 hit pieces published. What I received in response was gaslighting, evasive, logic-twisting replies that exposed the legacy media's playbook and skewed perception of reality. Now, I'm going to go through each of Fanning's responses to those 8 questions, highlighting the core logical fallacies, circular arguments where he assumes his conclusion as proof. The overall pattern here appears to assume that Rebel News is inherently hate-mongering without evidence, and he uses that assumption to justify his inflammatory statements. It's classic circular reasoning. So here, let's break it down. Question number 1. Fanning blames Rebel News for a hate campaign around the nickname Sing Hortons, claiming that it is a source for rhetoric cycling through local Facebook groups, yet admits it didn't originate with us. He denies saying we sparked the campaign, but his editorial clearly implies it. This is a straw man and circular argument. He assumes the rhetoric traces back to Rebel without proof and then uses that assumption to justify blaming us. If the term was already trending, why blame Rebel for creating this story or this term? His evasions dodge the real question of where it started. Secondly, on comparing immigration concerns to a 1925 Ku Klux Klan cross-burning, Fanning doubles down. He equates the goal of Rebel to stoke racial fear and hatred via online circulation, which he says is basically a modern KKK equivalent. Once again, Fanning assumes the intent is racial hatred without citing any racial references in the report, and then he uses that assumption to validate the inflammatory comparison. It's a false equivalence fallacy. Legitimate concerns about fraud and child exploitation, supported by audits, polls, and government documents, aren't inherently fear-stoking. No evidence is provided for hatred of immigrants claim. It's an ad hominem projection. Ironically, this smears dissent while ignoring the report's focus on systemic abuse of immigration programs, not ethnicity, saying that my characterization of the protests and boycott of our local Tim Hortons is opportunistic, yet I didn't make mention of any of those things in my report because it was focused, again, on the exploitation of a minor into an arranged marriage immigration scheme. Number 3, regarding alleged reference to the owner's ethnicity, Fanning denies making a direct reference, claiming the story refers to Facebook groups and not my coverage, and points to an indirect reference when I asked the original interviewee about the shift from old stock Canadian heritage to the current state of the local establishment. But I mean, even a woman I lent tissue to at that location because they didn't even have any paper towel in the bathroom confirmed this sentiment.
It comes in handy, that's for sure.
No, well, these days Tim Hortons is really deteriorating.
It is. You're right.
Yes.
It's not like it used to be before where you would come in and everything was prestige.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's fallen.
Does the Picton Gazette ever talk to anyone outside of their echo chamber? Fanning's response is a complete contradiction. The editorial says the story gets its traction from the fact that the family is East Indian, which they actually changed after my media request to say South Asian, when I noted that my report didn't make anything or any reference about race. Fanning desperately clings to his race-baiting narrative, falsely claiming ethnicity fuels the story's traction when it doesn't. He fabricates ethnic contrast to defend his focus, while the only race mentioned in my report is undeniable evidence. Text messages where the manager propositioned a teen for an Indian boyfriend, and a colleague casually normalizes this exploitation of a vulnerable minor with, "Don't be uncomfortable, she's asked everyone," laugh out loud, "She doesn't want her brother to go back to India." Fourth, on dismissing temporary foreign worker abuses as racist, when pointed out, Fanning admits abuses exist but calls highlighting them racist because it's opportunistic to characterize an entire ethnic group via worst cases. This, again, is circular. He presupposes Rebel's motive is to tar ethnic groups, again, with no evidence given, and then uses that to label fact-based criticism as racist. It's a distortion of reality. I've repeatedly reported on broad, documented issues with immigration. For instance, up to 75% of temporary foreign worker respondents in a 2021 parliamentary report note that employers are hiring based on nationality, which is actual discrimination and racism. The fact that labor market impact assessments, which gives employers the go-ahead to hire foreign workers, have tripled in Picton since 2022, while youth unemployment skyrockets. These aren't generalizations to entire groups, but rather a system that is ripe with exploitation and fraud, which is of great public interest. Recognizing patterns and reporting facts that reveal them isn't racism. Fifth, regarding the rampant fraud and immigration scams well documented across Canada, Fanning doesn't deny their existence, but dodges the question by claiming the Gazette focuses only on local news and national issues only when they hit locally. This evasion ignores why, if fraud is so well documented, like the Auditor General reporting on it, the Immigration, Refugees, Citizenship Canada warnings of 5-year bans, and Kijiji labor market impact assessment sales, the Gazette won't report those facts in context. Worse yet, Fanning justifies his limited coverage, yet doubles down on smearing Rebel News simply because of my presence, highlighting a glaring contradiction. The Gazette calls Rebel fake news and hate news, accuses us of creating stories rather than reporting them, yet they themselves made us the news instead of investigating the real issue. Fanning even says Rebel News coming to town is news. So which is it? The Gazette is clearly crafting a biased narrative and passing it off as hyper-local journalism. Number 6, on trespass laws and not being asked to leave, Fanning relies on an OPP release acknowledging that the officer's response in the video does not align with the provisions of the Trespass to Property Act when, in fact, his use of discretion was very much appropriately applied in this instance, and I broke it down in a previous video. When pressed about how Fanning would know if I was or wasn't asked to leave, a prerequisite for police escalation, he switches gears, blaming my so-called aggressive question, where I asked if I could start the process to marry the manager's brother for $20,000 as the thing that prompted police. But if you look back on the footage, not only were the police as surprised as I was that the call was about me, since I had already long left the establishment, but the Tim Hortons employee says that the call was because I was like standing in the lobby.
The lady.
What lady?
The one who's running the.
Yeah. And what's wrong with that?
So he said that no one, like, she's trespassing in the private property.
How is she trespassing?
Like, he was like standing in the lobby.
She is an independent journalist. She was never trespassed from this property, and she has her 100% rights to be here.
So which is it, Fanning? I was asked to leave, I wasn't asked to leave, my questions were aggressive, or I was standing in the lobby? Does Tim Hortons even have lobbies? This straw-grasping, skewed perception of reality dodges the core logic. Under Ontario trespass laws, it requires a request to leave, which didn't happen. And even their own quoted award-winning reporter and journalism educator, Haiti Corby, says that the law allows for very limited exceptions for journalists covering stories with an overriding public interest, such as threats to public safety. But the Tim Hortons case doesn't meet the criteria for that, as though allegations of immigration schemes, soliciting minors into arranged scam marriages, conspiracy to commit fraud, etc., aren't all serious threats to public safety. And again, Fanning assumes questions asked politely but clearly tongue-in-cheek somehow justify police involvement. I mean, are these people really journalists or narrative enforcers? Number 7, on the woman taking the photo of me interviewing Matt from behind and not sticking around to ask questions about these hate allegations before plastering them in the Gazette, or, maybe interviewing Matt himself, Fanning confirms she is Gazette staff. And it actually turns out that the woman is his partner, co-owner of the Gazette, Karen Valahora. They're pictured together and featured in a York University article from 2023 talking about embracing broader issues like linking local concerns of agriculture with immigration and environmental degradation to national and global matters. The duo even planned to involve university students to cover global topics, reflecting ambitions far beyond narrow local reporting that he tried to claim he does. This contradicts Fanning's defense that the paper only covers national issues when they appear locally, and exposes a real disconnect between his rhetoric and the Gazette's actual editorial direction. Regardless, Fanning claims that his wife didn't need to ask me questions, which contradicts ethical journalism practices. The Gazette failed to conduct a basic journalistic practice called the right of reply, which is a crucial practice to ensure fairness and media accountability. It's something I afforded to them and serves to show weak cowardice when one of their own staff was literally right behind me taking photos with some sort of gotcha smirk, and then failed to ask me even just one question. This is the co-owner of the Gazette. It blatantly ignores the right of reply, especially when serious allegations like hate stoking are being made. After all, the right of reply is exactly why I went into that Tim Hortons in the first place and offered them the opportunity to refute the $20,000 marriage scheme claim. That's not aggressive. That's shoe leather journalism, which maybe the Gazette should learn a thing or two about. Now, if Rebel News' mere arrival is in itself news, as Fanning says, then why again another contradiction? Shouldn't they have engaged with me on site if my mere presence is the news? This response is in and of itself revealing of their bias. It's not journalism, it's basically spying without interaction and then publishing smears. And finally, the Gazette's insistence on clinging to its qualified Canadian journalism organization status, as if this grants them a monopoly on truth and renders us somehow lesser for having been denied. In reality, our application was rejected because of our calls to action, the very thing that sustains our independent journalism without government handouts. Yes, we applied. Of course we did. We'd love to give our subscribers tax-deductible receipts, just like the legacy media does. But unlike Fanning and his peers who rely on taxpayer-funded bailouts, which, by the way, are only growing, we choose transparency with our audience over compliance with arbitrary political standards. That's the real difference, and boy does it show. Plus, the Gazette literally brought no facts to either of their reports, no government sources, no parliamentary reports, no stats on immigration or fraud-riddled programs. It's more tabloid than journalism, but hey, at least their government approved to do it. Now, overall, the response from the Picton Gazette publisher Chris Fanning is riddled with contradictions, misrepresentations, and loaded insinuations that collapse at even the slightest bit of critical thought. The irony is that he claims to champion local journalism, yet he and his wife aren't even local. They moved to the area 2 years ago. The publication is a case study in what's wrong with agenda-driven media in rural Ontario. Thin on facts, heavy on the spin, and quick to smear anyone who challenges the narrative. And it looks like lazy spin is a pattern with the Picton Gazette. This summer, Fanning and his wife published an editorial, County Fake, attacking a truly local grassroots group, Prince Edward County Residents Association, and its site, countyfirst.ca. They accused them of anonymity, being factually incorrect, and relying on AI-generated misinformation, especially when it came to a media bias report they published critical of the Gazette. Look no further than this sentence claiming that the United States is descending into fascism to recognize the editorial slant encompassed by the Gazette. But the local association pushed back. They defended transparency and their right to anonymity, noting the Gazette once praised their work only to dismiss it as hallucinations weeks later. They also exposed glaring inconsistencies and bias in the Gazette's reporting, which consistently offers positive spin for the mayor, council, and developers, while rarely scrutinizing the impact that development is having on heritage, parkland, or featuring community concerns about any of it. The association also clarified factual information on funding data, showing that the Gazette receives tens of thousands of dollars in financial assistance from both the federal and provincial governments. Suffice to say, it's no surprise that my investigation into immigration program exploitation was smeared as the equivalent of a Klan rally by this radical agenda-driven academic duo. And it's worth mentioning here that after this coverage, I received actual hate mail wishing death on my children. What responsibility does the Picton Gazette bear for that after publishing inflammatory rhetoric equating my reporting to a Klan rally? It's becoming increasingly evident that government-backed media wants to maintain control of the narrative until diverse voices with facts challenge it, and they'll go to great lengths to protect their influence. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. If you value independent journalism that asks real questions and doesn't back down when the narrative pushes back, well, now is a great time to show it. A great way to support this work is by becoming a subscriber to our channel. You can do so at rebelnewsplus.com and subscribe to get our exclusive added value content so that you never miss a report. That's rebelnewsplus.com.